Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the Fatherhood Authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to I Am Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. Thank you for joining us another Sunday morning. If you happen to be listening to us for the first time this week, you can obviously listen to the show anytime you want to listen to it, but we know that the vast amount of people clock in on this Sunday morning because you know that it is a new episode, and we are always bringing you interesting and provocative minds, thought leaders, influencers, passionate people about this work as it relates to fatherhood, but more in the sense of how it looks around fatherhood, family, children, moms, health, employment, all of those things, and really bringing a personal aspect to this conversation so that people can really understand what this work is about. But today we are honored to welcome Dina Israel. She is a senior associate of MDRC, one of the nation's most respected resource organizations dedicated to improving the lives of low-income individuals and families. With over 20 years of experience, Dina has worked with human service agencies across the country to design, implement, and evaluate programs that make a tangible difference in people's lives. Her deep focus on fatherhood, family stability, and the critical intersection of evidence and practice has helped shape how we understand and support fathers in communities nationwide. Dina brings a unique blend of research, insight, and on-the-ground experience to the conversation, and her commitment to transforming data into real impact makes her voice one of the most important voices in the fatherhood field today. Let's introduce my good friend, Dina Israel. How you doing today?
Oh my God, Kenny, I am doing really nice, and you are already going to make me cry. Thank you.
You deserve it all. I
Oh.
love everything about Dina Israel. Y'all don't even understand. And so we've been working together for a minute, right? But really began to work a little more closely over the last few years as we begun to kind of, particularly since Fathers Incorporated has entered the service delivery space. Kind of when I was doing my other stuff with the clearinghouse, there was kind of loose interaction. But now that we've gotten into direct service and I've stuck my hands a little more into our product development, and I'm now listening more to people like Nigel Vann and Dr. David Miller and others, and beginning to kind of understand this research thing. It has enlightened me in ways that I have made a commitment to figuring out how to bridge the gap between researchers, service providers, and then service providers and the people that they serve. Dina, how are you?
I'm good. You know what? Whenever talking to you, I feel like we find mutual understanding, and that is why I do what I do, to be in that intersection. I love it.
Sounds good. We start our podcast off with a very interesting, because it's relevant to the conversation that we're having, and I have everybody share this, and you can share it
Yeah.
however you want to share it, from whatever perspective you want to share it. But tell us your daddy story.
Okay, my daddy story. How much time do you have?
Go
I'm
for
just kidding. All right. Well, I grew up in a household with some of the typical kind of difficult circumstances a lot of the people that we encounter in our services have. So my parents were estranged from one another. It led to a childhood where my dad wasn't around. We had scarce resources. The family court system was kind of all around us because there was tension there. And I was kind of a scholarship kid. Like, I was kind of hopping through one educational experience to the other, with thank God for scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
I reunited with my father after about 20 years apart. And so my life has taken a really nice turn. But at the same time, the questions that I was filled with after a childhood like I had, like what was happening, what were these systems we were kind of encountering, what was influencing the decisions, who else is growing up like this. It can be very isolating. And I channeled all those questions into a research career, frankly, and it continues to today because the questions never stop. I mean, I've seen, I guess the questions never stop, and it's really a conversation, right? Research to me is like a conversation. So it keeps going. And I that's my daddy's story and why I do
Yeah.
this.
Most researchers that I've interviewed, almost to a person, has had some personal experience that has driven them to answer a question or some
Mm,
questions. I remember, I think the most compelling one was Dr. Ronald Mincy, who told me the story about how he was working for, I believe it was a court he was working for, it might have been child support. And he was looking for a record. He had to receive a record for something as a part of his job and came across the record of his mom and dad in the court system
mm,
and read it. And he had never knew anything about what was going on. And he had the same epiphany point that you had, which he's sitting there. He says, I'm reading this thing and I'm like, my God, now I understand what happened to my family because I'm looking at these court records on what happened to them going through. And he says, my thirst since has been to figure out why is this happening? Like, why is this happening to me? Or why did it happen to me? And why did it happen to others who look like me? And I was like, that's deep. I'm like, I don't even think that, you know, folks, and his thing to me was no one had ever asked him that question before.
yeah, right.
Like researchers, we just think that you guys come out of school and you all want to come in and I just want to research, but we never think, just like not for profit work, right? And so
Yeah.
most people who go into not for profit work go in because they're trying to solve a personal solution, a personal issue, or
Mm,
a problem that they want to solve. I think everybody who gets into human services to a certain extent comes in the same way, right? It's something about this particular thing that they want to address, and they believe that the best way that they can do it is through their work. But what was the most, if you can think about the number one driving question that you wanted to answer, what was it?
ooh. Um, it was kind of driven by an experience I had in college,
Mm-hmm.
um, where I actually didn't. You hear this kind of a lot, where um, some low income kids actually don't know that they're low income.
Mm-hmm.
Like or just other labels we may or people might place upon us. I had a label. I had this label placed upon me because I was eligible for a low income student support at college,
Mm-hmm.
and I was baffled. And so I was kind of struck by how it was presented to me because it gave a reaction to me like, oh, I don't know, is that me? Or I was baffled by the language that was used, and um but really struck by the mix of circumstances that had found me at this great college where I was also dealing with or eligible for these kinds of services. I That has always been it's a long way of kind of saying that I've always been really wanting. I know that services come up out of good intention and a lot of research, right, and knowledge that we gain, and I really loved when I found MDRC. It was like the ideal job description when I saw it because it was sitting in a space of families and trying to discover and research different ways of supporting families. And yet they wanted somebody who could support their effort for technical assistance, or basically taking a research result and putting it into a format, which at the time was a how-to guide on how to actually take the research and use it for practitioners. And I was hired as the research assistant that was there. And it was like the perfect example of, or it was exactly what I was hoping for, because I knew the value of study and academic research and the rigor of that. But I was really having a hard time as, a science major, seeing it get used. And then I was also noting that the language you use in order to find that access point really matters, because it'll turn someone off or turn them on. And so all of that kind of showed up in this job description I saw out of college from MDRC. It was fascinating, really.
It almost sounds like MDRC found you. You didn't find them.
I don't know. It's been a nice experience, because the curiosity that I just hold is constantly fed by being able to kind of constantly ask people like you, what are you thinking about, and what's the latest question you have? Because I'm curious too. Let's go figure it out.
Absolutely. So since we've introduced MDRC, tell people what it is and what is the mission of MDRC.
Okay, so MDRC is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research organization that's been around about 50 years. One of our first project ever was actually supporting evaluators in implementing a new program design. So it was kind of in the service of helping the study and the program operate together. And it was in the 70s for supported employment program. And out of that, the value of program and research kind of all came together. And that's how the organization has really evolved into having both an overall focus on programs for low-income families, but thinking about it from both research and kind of the practice at the same time. So, and it's been what has made those large studies we've done happen, frankly. I mean, we were known for large scale decades of, welfare to work and family and education, higher education studies. The last 10 years, we've been fortunate to do so much with fatherhood programs. But MDRC has this mix of different skill sets all throughout the office. And it's really a collaborative environment where, I don't hold all of the data skills or anything. I sit on one part of a project right now, directing them or helping them get implemented, while others hold other expertise. And it's just really a lovely thinking space, I guess.
Yeah. You said something interesting. I want you to strip it apart for me a little bit, because I think that most people who run agencies don't think about the difference between these two things. And you said that some of the research that you do are designed to help program work with service. Like, a lot of people think that those two things are the same, like the program and the service. Like, those are two different things. Talk about that a little bit.
Like the organization and then the service. Is that what you think?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, every organization has choices they make about what services to provide, and it creates kind of a culture, right? And that's one of my favorite questions to ask is, tell me about your service, but I really want to know, what is it embedded inside? Because that creates different kinds of relationships or different kinds of motivations that sometimes the service really aligns with and sometimes it doesn't. And so when we look for strong places to partner with, we're looking at both the service idea and the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So it, because all of it is part of the kind of the world of where participants show up.
Right. I think that when we talk about that, and so two words that I've been using a lot lately, particularly in talking to my staff and my leadership of my staff, I've been using macro and micro a lot lately.
Mm,
And I've been like as an agency, we have to really focus on the micro, like the details of what we're doing. But our vision has to encompass the macro,
yeah.
right? And so I'm leaning on them a lot with, and we can't um gloss over any one of the two of those things.
Mm-mm.
And when I say that, oftentimes I'm often thinking in my head that that is the essence of research, right? Which is there is this macro thing. But in
Mm-hmm.
order to figure out why this macro thing is this macro thing, what's making this macro thing work, what's making this macro thing what it is, that I need to understand the micro.
Yeah.
And the micro might not be one thing, the micro might be 10 things that
Yep.
all have to be looked at separately in its own space to really understand what's happening to the micro, because 9 micros could be working but one is not, but you got to determine which one's not working.
Yep.
Is that the longevity of research?
Yeah. It's such a, you need both, just like you're saying. And man, the details, there's so much. This is why I love that a place like MDRC exists, because it allows us to specialize. Like
Hmm.
I don't have to know everything, but I know the details of what it takes to present someone with the opportunity to tell their story as part of the study, and what that, the fears or the excitement that may come from that. And
Hmm.
I know how to kind of, I think about that all the time. Or I think about, um, okay, we want to learn this, we want to answer this question with this kind, but there are so many different data choices. I
Hmm.
mean, or the idea of asking the same question of many different people in the system. I mean, there's so many choices, and it's really important. I think it's really important to not get comfortable, eh,
Hmm.
whether it's in my method for setting up a research project or just in the kinds of methods we use. I mean, that's really exciting right now. The innovation and the new ideas for measurement that are coming up. It's really,
Hmm. Which one is more true, or are they equally true? The story is in the data, or the data is in the story?
oh, I like the data is in the story, I think,
Mm.
because I like to lead first with, well, what's the story? And then oftentimes I'm sitting in a conversation going, oh, okay, what kind of question or data point could I use to like extract and give visual or illustration of that?
Mhm.
That's one of my roles, aside from just like facilitating the space
Mhm.
for conversation and thought on a particular detail.
So
Yeah.
let's roll into this space. We're in a unique space, which is this responsible fatherhood space.
Hmm.
And I am sure that there are some nuances that exist in this space that probably don't exist in any other spaces of human service because of the
Yeah.
nature of this work. When you look at your research within the fatherhood space, how much does it differ from any other human service issue or space out there? Is it because it's so new, or is it because it's so unknown, or is it
Mm.
because it's so different? Is it so new? Is it so unknown? Or is it so different?
Well, right now, I don't know if I feel like it's so new because the MDRC was part of kind of the first large scale, rigorous demonstration of a service idea for a father. This was in the 90s.
Mm,
Parents' Fair Share. There had been, services happening, but like to pick it up and actually bring visibility. And that launched what it's just been growth ever since. The federal government investing in it, at the same time investing in research and other groups coming together. And I've never encountered such a with the responsible fatherhood space. I find it to be really amenable to the conversation of data.
mm,
I can go into other spaces and it's a foreign conversation. It's better these days, but like I remember, 15 years ago trying to talk to organizations for youth or moms and babies, even to get them comfortable with something that when I showed up for fatherhood, it was very different. There was a conversation already going. There is data there.
mm.
So in that sense, I don't know if new is research. It's really in a really nice advanced conversation right now.
Is it
Um,
so wide open because it's unknown?
yes.
Okay.
So there's an enormous amount not known. It's like I talk, I mean, we don't know. There's so much that and in that sense, it's very new, right?
Mhm.
Because we've been there's this one question about co-parenting and how you think about what one can do to reduce the tension between co-parents, and like we just keep trying to find the right kind of large scale kind of policy idea. And
Mhm.
yeah, you're totally right. It's hard to say new, old. What else were you asking me about?
Unknown.
The
And then
unknown.
the last one is it so unknown because it's so different?
Right. So I think we should always, it's unknown and there's always going to be unknowns. We're never going to be able to know it all. And that's the beauty of, being humble and curious forever.
Right.
Um, and because it's different, of course it's different. It's really, but even within fatherhood, it's different. Like that's the other thing. I've been really fortunate with you to be able to talk to different states and the different ways they're coming around the idea of engaging fathers and services, and it differs. But the one thing you and I were talking about recently is how with the responsible fatherhood program, like a father can show up and there's a real holistic like wrap around that individual in um, employment or parenting topics or relationship topics. Um, there's a lot of services for mothers and children. They can be very specialized.
Mhm.
Um, and some of them can be co-located and stuff, but like there's something, the father is different and also the service structure can be kind of different, is different
Right.
around that person. Hmm.
Yeah, and it's kinda interesting because when you start thinking about the research of it, part of the research is in understanding what are the issues of this thing.
Yeah.
And you're also looking at what are the mechanisms that are working to provide solutions for these issues. And sometimes those things don't match up. And I
Right.
believe that's where the newness impacts,
Hmm.
right? Because you are talking about a very different population of people who respond. So I used to always say that, and I don't know this to be true. This is just Kenneth Braswell thinking off the top of his head and assuming that this is true. That as we were developing programs for moms, that we never separated the fact that moms are women. And so we created programs for moms understanding that they were women, which means that we were understanding the nature of who they are, how they respond to solutions, how they express their pain, how they express their resiliency, how they express their love. Like, we look at moms through the lens of womanhood.
Mm-hmm.
But when we work with fathers, we are always trying to separate the fatherhood from the manhood. And we
Mm.
don't want to look at fatherhood through the lens of manhood. We want to separate those things because there are these things that we want to make happen in the fatherhood space, right? Which
Mm.
is why when we start talking about fathers, it's so easy to talk about the expectation of fathers paying child support,
Mm.
but we don't look through the lens of manhood to determine how that's impacting how a father thinks about
Mm.
child support and what is it that you're asking him to do, because every lens looks different, every man looks different, every circumstance is different, every situation is different. But when we look at women motherhood, we make that determination off the bat that every case is a fingerprint that needs to be flexible enough to be able to provide them this service that they directly need. But on the other side, we want a paper cutter, one size fits all thing to
Mm.
make them what
Oh,
we
I see what
believe
you're.
accountable,
Yeah. No, that's
right?
a really good point. That's why we need to understand it and see if
Yes.
it's the right
Right.
mix. Or
Right.
I think you're totally right.
Right. Now, I think what research is doing, and you can speak to this or not, I really think that because of the emergence of research that's happening, to your point earlier, we don't know it all, but we do know more.
Yes, we
Right.
do.
We do know more.
And we're trying to unpack the details so that it's not about one big, what is the one big universe doing? We're actually looking at different approaches
Mhm.
now, which suggests a more advanced space that we're in with the conversation, which is nice because we're
Mhm.
we're able to dive in. But I'll tell you, one of the my first part of my career was with TANF programs, um, employment services, Social Security disability, home visiting, a lot of services tied to TANF. When I showed up to my first fatherhood study, um, the one of the first things I heard was, you cannot put any old intervention into this space. It
Mm.
needs to come from the space of man, father. Really be careful with trying to grab a parenting education program that fits over here for mom and put it in the space here.
Mhm.
And so I'm so grateful for um, the years that we've had, because uh, within the field, MDRC has been able to try different ways of coming around the co-design or the
Mhm.
co-creation of the idea. And with every project, I feel like we're getting better at, for the first one, maybe we were looking for an intervention idea, like we were hearing what was going on in the conversations on the ground, but then we were looking, say, for a model developer to see if they had something that they had created for men that could answer the question.
Mhm.
And that's kind of saying, hey, do you want to do this, try this model? And right. But what's very different lately is we've been able to sit more like with, you and your team and say to organizations like yours, like, okay, what are you thinking about?
Mhm.
Are you already doing something there? And what do you think if we studied it, but also like added a couple of these things? And there's a give and take, and
Mhm.
it really feels, it can be this dance between what using an evidence based or evidence informed practice in a space where you're also co-creating. we're chipping away at, this is an example of how research and practice are trying to figure it out, because it's not obvious to me, but I love that about research in the responsible fatherhood space right now, because it's really been helping evaluators get better.
Right.
Frankly.
Talk about, because you just mentioned a term that I know frustrates people,
Oh,
particularly
what
in
did
the
I say?
practitioner space, and that's evidence based, right?
Oh, yeah.
Talk about what that is, the difference between what it is, and then the difference between evidence based and evidence informed. Because I think people, um,
Yeah.
they
You know,
freeze sometimes, right? They freeze is the
yeah.
best way I can think about this. Like, what we got to have, what does that mean? And they just freeze.
Yeah, it's that bad label, right? Gotta be careful of those labels. I mean, to me, I guess I think about it in terms of, I really do think about evidence building as, like I was saying, like as a conversation. You can call it research, or you can call it just sitting down and listening and
Mhm.
observing, building trust so that people feel like they can share their story. But I guess it's trying to pull out, it might be other terms like data. Evidence is data, but what is data? Well,
Mm.
I mean, I love, it's everything. Like I think what's really interesting and neat is to have a real mixed methods, large study, so that you can um, ask the same question a few times, but in different ways, right?
Right.
Like, and you don't know whether me as an interviewer in front of you will, there's no way it can draw out the same answer from you as if I were to, like, ask you to drop in the answer to a question, say in a voicemail box, which are some things we're trying right now. It's just that matters, and I want everyone to realize that the data could be the smallest little thought that somebody shares,
Mhm.
as it can be that data point in a program, in a system.
Mhm.
It's everything.
Right.
And so in that way, I guess evidence-based, is, there are technical terms on what that is, and we don't have to get into all that right
Yeah.
now, but
Is the only way that you can get to evidence basis is through rigorous research?
it's really important. Um, no, but it's a real important, I guess, like a randomized, there, it's on a spectrum, right?
Mm.
And you can build evidence and form an understanding with data in many different ways, as from a program system. But like, to really answer certain questions, that's where more rigor comes from, and that's where, like, more technical understanding about an evidence-based program,
Mhm.
it kind of comes out of, because it usually assumes certain kinds of studies and methods that were used. And
Y
yeah.
Yeah, I think that, you know, in my infancy coming up, trying to understand the terminology of these things, when you talk about data and you say data is everything, right? So the question is then, so 2 questions. One is, what is the data you're talking about, right? And then secondly, how do you document that? And I
Mm,
think there's a separation between the acquisition of data for
yeah.
service providers and the recording of it, because they don't know what to do with the recording of it if they don't happen to have a relationship with an MDRC. Like, they know they're supposed to clock some data, but they don't know why, right? And
Hmm.
so a researcher comes in and says, "Hey, I've been watching your organization. Looks like you're doing some great work. We'd love to come in and do a study on the effectiveness of the work that you're doing, because we think you got something new and special here." Right? And then you say, "We want to help you, extract the right data from the people." And they're thinking to themselves, "Yeah, but I already collect data." And then
Yeah.
you're saying, "No, not your kind of data, our kind of data." And then it's kind of, yeah, but what's then the relevance of my data? if my data is simply this, I've been doing this work for 20 years and I know my population. It
Yeah.
is not on paper anywhere, but everything in my agency is centered around what we know about the community we serve. And the
Mm-hmm.
question is, as a researcher, how do you get that person to understand that what you have is relevant, but what you need is necessary?
You know what I often say is like policy making is like, let's say it's a pie, and we need all the elements. We need somebody who has the experience as
Hmm.
much as we need someone to be able to grab numerical understanding. And it's all part of the same pie of making, of making policies flow or work,
Right.
or progress. Yeah. So, and
I also wonder where they learned that from. Where would you? Because as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, so where did I learn that from? Where did I understand the importance of research in my work? When did I stop wanting to just doing the work
oh,
to
yeah.
understanding my work? Like that's a
Oh, when
leap
was
for some people. I don't know when it was.
it?
I
I
really
mean, I
don't.
think you have, I mean, I think the reason we get along the way we do is we're both really curious, and you've got a researcher head.
Well, that I am naturally, right? I'm curious naturally, and I understand, and so I get it once I get it. But I was thinking about what, where was I, and what was the transition? I know it was part of Fathers Incorporated that began, and I think part of it was that I did not agree in totality with everything I read about fatherhood.
Yeah, right. And you
And
wanted
I
to
was like,
show,
no, that's not like there was no, like this is not right. Like, and I
yeah.
know, and so you would say, well, Kenny, how do you know this? Like, Dina, I used to say this. I think I told you this one time before. I remember there was another agency that came in and wanted to do some stuff with Fathers Incorporated. And then the person was like, yeah, we could do this and we could do that. And, you really need to have your programs to be evidence based. Like, you got some great things. And I'm like listening to the person, and I finally said, um, my stuff doesn't need to be evidence based. And he was like, yes, it does. And I said, no, it doesn't. I said, you know why? I said, because I am the evidence. Like, you don't validate me. I am the evidence. Everything that you're talking about, I've been here since the beginning through. I've worked it. So everything I've gone through this over and over to get to it. Now, do I understand it in the way that you just described, which is all things are necessary, the analytical piece of it, the numeric data? At that point, I was purely looking at, don't dismiss what I know, right? For what
Yeah.
you're trying to tell me, because these two things are not matching up. And you're more interested in what you want to tell me as opposed to what you want to hear,
Mm,
because it's not matching up with your ideals about everything that you've come up with thus far. Right. And we all have to be okay with stepping back and saying, maybe I was wrong.
mm,
Or maybe I was off base a little bit. Maybe I need to take a step back and look at this from a different lens, because maybe that is the opening of the door that's going to get me to a greater understanding of this thing that we're trying to accomplish. Which is why I want to ask you the question about misconceptions, right? Because I know that in your mind's eye, moving forward in this space, you're thinking one thing, and then all of a sudden you're figuring out that, wow, it's not really like that. Like, what is the
mm-hmm.
biggest misconception you've seen in the fatherhood space in your research life?
Such a great question. Um, I think there are some situations where there's always situations where you think something's going to work. And so
Mhm.
and then you try it. And for one reason or the other, we either couldn't measure it, it wasn't working, We didn't have enough sample, which is numbers of people in the study. I've had disappointments, but have I had misconceptions? I don't know yet, Kenny, if I've encountered that, because probably I almost don't take no, because it feels like there's so many different ways to come around the same question. So for example, I could see that the field years ago was trying to grapple with, should we engage more than just the father? Like, should we have moments that are really kind of intentional moments between fathers and children? Some other systems, like in the child welfare space where they're doing supervised visits, they have some, processes over there. Responsible fatherhood was mostly engaged with, the adult male. I don't think we've answered, like, we tried one example and it didn't result in any difference. But I would never say that's a misconception, because I don't think we're done understanding or unpacking that question, because I don't think one study answers it.
Would your answer be different if I changed the word misconception to epiphany?
Oh,
Like, what is it
epiphany.
that you were seeing that you saw and you're like, oh, wow, I never thought about this before, or I didn't expect that?
That happens all the time, because all the time, because for example, there are situations where you think, you say, okay, why don't you call so and so and offer, say, hey, try this service with them, and call the co-parent or call a father or something, and then it attracts a certain kind of father or a certain kind of co-parent. Like, fathers have multiple co-parents. What does it mean when one of them shows up, but you're actually trying to talk to him about the child of another, attached to another former partner? That's really interesting. I wasn't expecting that. Same goes for a father, like in the child, and like a lot of the theory with some of the research behind engaging dad and his kid relates to dads who are non-residential. They don't live with their kid. But what if you get only dads wanting to do it that are living with their child? Like, you're going to get some different. So this happens all the time. And we have to be ready and flexible. And that's really why so much of research is just a relationship with a program. Trust that there's no wrong answer, really. We just need to be kind of open and flowing with what we're seeing, sharing it back and forth, and flexible, because the plan. I'm hoping that all of these are just intuitive, because they just are about. They're about everything, not just research, right? They're just about implementing well. And
I think it's just about maintaining full curiosity. Like,
yeah,
if you walk in with full curiosity, you're going to be open to whatever it is you see, whatever it is you hear. And then if it's different from your thinking, you're going to want to know why, which is going to keep you up at night, right? Okay,
yeah.
now we got to come back and we got to ask a different question, and we got to ask in a different way, because we need to like more fully understand this. When you're looking at all that we have learned over the years through research, like, what's working out there? What strategies are working? Something that you've seen that is like, wow, this seems like it's proven that everyone that we've evaluated with respect to this particular element of their program is actually working. And it has now become, to our belief, a necessary component to being able to serve dads.
I think the idea of having the service, like the idea of, it's very well documented that fathers do not always feel welcome when seeking social services. And and that there are some benefits, like they're better off having participated in something than not, like those, that real basic,
Mhm.
that feels like we're in such a better place and a more better, like there's still mountains to climb obviously, but there are more people willing to kind of listen and think about the Father, and are we reaching him more than ever? And I think it's thanks to
Mhm.
the work you do, but also the research and showing.
When you look at the extension of research, we talked about this earlier, and I wanted to circle back around to this because I don't think people understand like the full connect in research because we've been talking about it from the service provision side. But the other side of this is how does this impact policy, right? And what does that look like? Um, when you start thinking about this work, and you've kind of worked across the country and you've seen it just about it all, right? Where do you still see policy gaps between policy and program?
Oh, I mean, and it's really, it's it's mostly where, like, big picture is if I'm not seeing the conversation, like a back and forth conversation with the two, and also having research kind of next to it. If you've got a policy that is just there without conversation or understanding about the feelings and thoughts of people in it,
Mhm.
that's not working. Uh,
Mm.
it just, it only, it can, it's, or it makes me really nervous that it's not in touch with what is really needed,
Mm.
or yeah, or what it's accomplishing.
Right. This is one of those spaces where often said that um, it has been, at least from my vantage point, the most difficult space to try to legislate or regulate emotion.
Mm.
Like the emotion in the responsible fatherhood space is like no other space. Maybe in critical and chronic diseases where people are losing folks and things like that. But I'm just talking about on a day to day basis where emotions are so charged, not only by co parents, right? But society and fathers, men and women, black and white, rural and urban, um political sides of the aisle, which is kind of looking at fatherhood with their own assertions about who fathers should be and how fathers should be showing up. And all of that has so much emotion attached to it because it seems like, or it feels like it's personal. Like, because I've gone through this, I want to make sure that no other kid in life goes through this again because I don't want anybody to suffer the way I suffer. Like, the courts are emotionally charged. The child support officers are emotionally charged. Child welfare is emotionally charged. Everything is emotionally charged. Does that really make it difficult to get to overall policies when there is so much emotion in everything that you present, even though it has an evidential basis?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where the policymaking pie, you have to assume it's there. I
Mm,
don't think it's not there in other spaces. It's just maybe a little bit more comfortable or visible.
mhm,
That's all I can think of, because I've been to early child care centers where there's a teacher there and I'm talking to them about, hey, can we do some research? And it is too too emotional to
mm,
even come at you know the question, because they're too worried about what it will do to the children or the moms or the dads kind of engaged in. um, so I think it's always there, and it's important it's an important representation of it. Just, you can gain so much from emotion. We all have to like find ways to manage it, right? But
Mhm.
you also need to listen to it. I mean, this is a
Right.
fact of life.
Right.
You That is telling you something, right? Like your
Right.
reaction to something. Don't get rid of it. It has to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's, I mean, again, there's like a life lesson I just apply in this space, right? Like that's why I love this, because it really, yeah, we cannot live without emotions. It's not.
Yeah. What's next in the research space? Where do we have to go? Since we haven't gotten it all, like what's the next frontier of research in the fatherhood space? Things that we haven't gotten to yet. We know we need to get to it, but we really haven't gotten to it yet. I have a couple at the top of my head, but I want to hear what you're
Ooh, I
thinking.
want to. You probably have very specific ideas in your head. Um, I so I think about it in terms of you know, the program or policy idea, the research methods, and how well we're communicating with it, right? And
Mm,
so you got to be hitting all of those, because, for example, with communication, like a lot of what we're thinking about now is, about 10 years ago, it was like, write something shorter and more, you know,
mm,
available not just for a research audience, right?
mm,
Now it's like, can we take some of the work we've done and actually uh, share it on our website or some way with the fathers that were kind of part of the study? Like, that is a really uh, interesting and great question to be able to start like chipping away at,
mhm,
for communication, right? And
mm,
putting the information in the right hands. The I mean, I I'm listen, I'm focused on those children in the high conflict situations,
mm,
mostly. And so when I think about that, there are questions about, well, how do we get to the situation earlier? Um, what service or location? Like, that's where health systems come in, or like we're just barely scraping access points there.
mhm,
Um, what does it mean to involve a co-parent? Like, we keep saying, okay, maybe we should be working on this conflict more, but what does that look like? We got to keep going there. I'm really excited by the idea of the awareness of how father friendly or mom friendly the services feel.
mhm,
And it'll make, I think, if we start unpacking, well, what do you do with that information, and are you collecting data effectively to understand who's all around the child,
mhm,
and are there things we can do to make the systems work together better? Those
mhm.
are all things that really excite me, aside from just economic questions. We still need, there's just forever we need to keep working on the employment
Mhm.
work.
Yeah, no, the two that actually I have three, but the two that burn most in my head is technology as a service provider.
Mm-hmm.
How do we begin to start harnessing the advent of technology to provide services in areas where there aren't fatherhood programs? And how can you modernize that and digitize that so people can get on the ground personal delivery of services, including
Mm-hmm.
case management, including referrals, including training, all through a digital platform, which I'm actually in the beginning stages of building right now. And
Yeah.
I'm to test it in Metro Atlanta to see if it becomes a service model to be able to provide services for someone who could be in Boise, Idaho, or anywhere else in this country that's sitting on their couch and they're looking for services that could tap in and get full service, and a way to find how to bring in the human element. And I think a model to look at for that is the telehealth system.
Mm-hmm.
right? So providing services to people and still giving them a human touch is kind of where my mind is and what that looks like and how you can implement that. And so that's one of the things in the forefront of my mind that I'm looking at moving forward in the next year. So actually, we're already in the beginning stages of it, but looking to moving in that space. The second thing is we spend so much time thinking about when it comes to child well-being. We spend so much time, and then there's evidence out there that kind of informs us that tell us that this is the magic button that allows the success of child well-being through relationship. And I'm talking primarily marriage right now. Like we hang on that
Mm-hmm.
if the parent is married, our children are going to fare better.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they will. The question is, what if they don't? There's no successful pathway to success for them because we've already placed in our heads that if they don't come out of that, they're not going to fare as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think the key relationship in child well-being is not romantic relationship. I think the key relationship in child well-being is parental relationship, co-parenting.
Yeah.
That if I can build your capacity to be better parents, that relationship ultimately will mirror a married couple.
Mm.
And the reason that I believe that is because if you speak to any marriage where one or both of the parents travel more than 50% of the time, it means that those parents are not in the house for half the time and hearing and rearing up their child. So if
Yeah.
that's the case, why can't a co-parent who's only involved in their child half of their life have the same outcomes as a married couple whose parents are traveling or moving and not around their kids half the time?
Yeah.
Keep thinking about this in totality, and it's not in totality. It is in availability, and it is in access. Like for my children, like I've always said that the number one thing that is ultimately the best for a child is availability and access, not
Mm-hmm.
presence. Presence is up there, but availability is when a child has the ability to touch their parents no matter when.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Access is having the open ability to be able to do it without someone else telling them they can't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but those two things are co parenting issues, not romantic issues. And I
Yeah.
think that if we shift a little bit and begin to start thinking about, so in the co parenting space singular is biological mom and dad. The co parenting space plural is mom and dad and any support they have around them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Secondary, right?
Yeah.
Because this is the support circle that is the catch all for anything that the parents miss. And even when mom or dad is not in the equation, mom or dad's family is in the equation. And so it's a different concept. And I just
Yep.
want to begin to like get into a pilot program that allows me to focus on simply co-parenting relationships,
Yep.
regardless of whether or not they are romantically engaged or not, and see what the children's outcomes are going to look like in 10 to 15 years.
Yep.
And it's something in me that tells me
Would
that
you work with both parents?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I would work with both parents, but because I'm a fatherhood guy, the link or the common denominator in the relationship would be dad. He would be the connector. Everything would start with him and go down and go this way. As long as I can keep him in the scenario and in the mix, it is more likely that everybody else is going to be in the mix. But if I focus on her and he falls out, it is less likely that I'm going to be able to keep him in. So the work has to be keeping him in and keeping the support around them all, so that regardless of what the relationship is, he's always going to be in and committed. That the signing of the marriage license is not the only indicator of commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Because I
Yeah.
think that in essence, right, is the difference between married and not married people. One made the commitment on paper, the other one didn't. And so, Dana,
So,
if you were talking to an agency that really is on the fence about doing research, and you were coming in and you wanted to convince them on why is it important for you to really think about research in your agency, what would you tell
mm, you know what? I don't think I'd tell them anything.
them?
Get, I would first just try and listen and have them talk to me about what the things they're thinking about. And usually from that comes a question, or even, it could be as simple as, oh, wow, it looks like you're asking everybody in your community to do X, like take this pamphlet. Um, are you, are you kind of counting how many you hand out? And
Mm,
like through that research, conversations just naturally kind of come up because you're just
mhm,
like, oh, do you know how many? Do you know once they take it, what happens? Are they
mhm,
telling you that how many are calling the hotline?
mhm,
What are they asking about? It's just this is where it's like, yeah, I don't think I would ever, I don't know anymore. I mean, I have had to show up and say, you know what, you've got this funding, you got to do this research, but
right.
never the way I always found common ground was by talking about the policymaking puzzle and how this is one part of it as well as their work, and we're in this together, and you don't need to do it alone, because that's what I'm here for, to take the burden off of you so you can do what you're good at, and I'll just worry about the other stuff in the behind the scenes. So
Great words of wisdom. Look at you. Look at
oh,
you.
thank you, Kenny. I can't believe you got me to do this.
Thank you so much. I told you. I was like, I was going to like sit back and listen to all kinds of wisdom come out of your head today. And I know
Oh,
that it's going to benefit a lot of people, but I appreciate you, my friend. And we have so much work to do. As you can
we
see,
do.
we
We
got a
got to
lot of
keep
work to do.
unpacking that question of what is evidence based.
Yeah.
I think there's more to that answer.
Absolutely. And so it actually, one of the things that, so this is an exploration, right? So the exploration for me has been, so I use neither of those terms, evidence based or evidence informed. My term is evidence inspired.
Oh, okay.
I can be
I take that.
inspired by your evidence to do the right thing, but don't have to
Yeah.
be harnessed by your evidence. It gives me the ability to be flexible.
Yeah.
I use inspired also in the faith space where I am not a faith based entity, but I am
Mhm.
faith inspired. So you should be clear in understanding that everything that I do comes through the faith of what I understand and my belief, right?
Mhm.
But no,
Yeah.
I am not faith based. And so you're not going to see scripture throughout all of my stuff,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you should know that that's how I function. That's how,
Yeah.
and I think that there's a great marriage that can happen between the three of those things:
Mhm.
evidence based, informed, and inspired. I think that there is a nice synergy in those three spaces to be able to fall in, where people can actually walk in and feel like I don't have to color between these lines, but I can respect these lines and still do the things that I'm trying to do. But on occasion, if my crayon goes outside the line, doesn't mean that I did anything wrong.
Yeah. And use it as one piece of many perspectives that you're gathering, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being on I Am Dad podcast. Thank you to all of my I Am Dad podcast listeners. You know how I like to leave you. Always be kind to others as you're kind to yourself, or you might find yourself by yourself. Always shoot high for your goals, because even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars. And as my good friend and mentor Art Mitchell always said to me, Kenny, it's nice to be important. It's nice to be nice. It's important to be nice. Messing it all up hard. Sorry about that. It's nice to be important, but it's so much important to be nice. Until next Sunday, take care. See you soon.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am dad, period.
Yeah.